This is CityCast Twin Cities. I'm Sean McPherson, and here's what the cities are talking about. Tane, what is the thing you'd like to keep secret about your routine at the fair, and you really wish I wasn't asking you this on a publicly available podcast?
So every year for several years now, I go and do Almanac, Twin Cities Public Television Almanac does a live, or it does a taped broadcast from the fair, and I do it, and I dress all up like for it as I normally do, and people, but then I bring like a whole change of clothes. So I don't know why I care about this, but I do sort of like a costume change in the middle of the fair. And so there is a moment, and this actually happened last year at the fair, where I am changing clothes just sort of like behind the TPT booth. And now I'm just going to tell you, I was doing this last year, and Senator Tina Smith walked back there, and I was completely like I was not wearing a shirt or anything. And she was like, Tane? And I was like, hello, Senator Smith. I did not expect us to meet this way. So anyway, if whoever you are, just give me 5 minutes behind the TPT booth before I go out to the rest of the day, especially if you are a federally elected official.
Okay, Tane, is it possible that seeing you shirtless is why Tina Smith retired?
I mean, she timed it that way, I'm sure.
It's not worth it.
Yeah, she's like, this is who I have to represent. I'm done.
Okay, so Tane clearly has like some topless secrets involving elected officials at the state fair. What are your state fair secrets? Are they, I hope, very different than that? We need them because we want to cover some awesome state fair stuff that often gets overlooked when we do our state fair coverage later in the month. So send us a text or leave us a voicemail. That number is 612-217-0637. Now, on today's episode, we're going to talk about the primary that happened yesterday and the Right to Repair initiative that could be on November's ballot in St. Paul, plus the barely silver lining in the upcoming federal THC ban, and we're going to open up our mailbag. But before any of that, I got to give a huge warm welcome to our newest neighbors, Andrea S. and Peter T. Peter wrote in and said, I support CityCast Twin Cities because I can keep up to date on current events, job openings, and local and state issues. The reporting and conversations on the podcast is amazing too. Thank you so much, Peter. And Andrea wrote in and said that the pennant pushed her over the edge. What pennant, you ask? Andrea is talking about the fact that CityCast found an unopened box of custom Twin Cities pennants that were originally made for our spring membership campaign, and today is actually the last day that you can get one when you sign up to be a member. These are beautiful purple pennants with an icon of a loon on them, and if you'd like to become a neighbor like Andrea and Peter just did, just head on over to membership.citycast.fm/Twin Cities. Tane, at the time of this recording, we don't have every result from yesterday's primary. But as we start to focus on the general election coming up on November 3rd, there are some worthy questions to ask about how things are going to play out in Minnesota. And we're going to get to that and talk about some of the major primaries that happened. But first, I really want to talk about a nice example, at least in my opinion, of democracy in action. Tane, I know you live in Minneapolis, but you stay aware of what's happening in St. Paul. What do you know about the Right to Repair initiative in St. Paul?
So this is a citizen-led initiative to get a measure on the ballot, which if voters, I believe, approve this and passed it, then it would create some new rules around tenants in rental units in St. Paul would be able to apply a certain amount of a month's rent, I believe, towards repairs that were deemed necessary that a landlord hadn't made in an appropriate amount of time. That's sort of and I'm sure we're going to talk about, like, there's very particulars about the language and the legality of it, but that's kind of the gist in my understanding.
Yep, you're right. With one note, the broad brushstroke that was wrong is it's $500 or half the rent.
Got it.
So it's not a full month's rent, but up to half the rent. And we've covered this on the podcast before, including speaking with Cole Hansen, who's one of the lead organizers with the group that's been pushing for this. Yes, citizen-led, and it's called Safe Homes St. Paul. Tane, as a person who gets out and about in St. Paul a lot, I saw folks out with clipboards throughout the summer, getting folks to sign, doing the work. I was asked multiple times if I was a resident of St. Paul, and I saw all that work going on, and then it actually came to fruition, but then some things changed.
Yeah, so they reached the threshold for signatures necessary to get this on the ballot, but then lawyers and city council members got involved.
And this is like when lawyers get involved, it can really mess things up. And in this case, City Attorney Irene Cow was worried about, quote, how the ballot language interacted with state law. And that is not a quote from Irene Cow. That actual quote, how the ballot language interacted with state law, is from a Star Tribune writer, Josie Albertson Grove. Tana, I'd like to point out that, like, something interacting with state law sounds like, oh, I'm worried about how the balsamic will mix with the oil. Like, does it violate state law? They have the exact same verbiage in Duluth. Tane, is Duluth in Minnesota or is it another state?
It is. For now, yeah. We still got it, and it's one of the better ones. I like Duluth a lot. So you're right. Like Duluth passed something that is almost identical, and they have not seen a lot of things. I mean, so the city attorney in St. Paul raised some questions about this measure putting specific a number of days on how long a landlord would have to make repairs, and noted that that would differ from what state law is. There were also some questions about how this would interact with historic home preservation and requiring repairs that might not be actually even technically allowed for historic homes under other statutes. All of that, I don't know, like this is what lawyers like have fun with, is sort of doing these different things or whatnot. I mean, the reason in part where this ended up being controversy is the city attorney put this forward, and then the city council, the St. Paul City Council, voted 5-2 to say, we're not going to allow this on the ballot because it would create this big mess or whatever. And they did this sort of like at the very last minute. But on Monday, a judge actually overruled all of that.
Right. And this is where I see democracy in action. If you got some type of memo that's going to convince city council to vote it down, that's not going to win the day. You actually have to win in court. And they did not. And I am just glad that these people who walked around with clipboards all day are going to have their day at the ballot box. Whether St. Paul decides to do it or not, I was just impressed that they were able to deliver it this way. And I really want to point out that one of the organizers said, this is an organizer who is the committee chair for Safe Homes St. Paul, said, we followed the process and the city did not. So this 11th hour change to not let it on is bad business. Whether it's a thing that should be voted against or for, I was just happy to see it not being able to sort of backdoored shut down after all this work from citizens. Tane, can I move on? Can we talk about elections now?
Sure. Yeah. What? Okay. What? Are there things to talk about?
Well, yeah. And we don't know all of them, right? We don't know what has happened with the results from yesterday's primary in a number of these elections. But the thing that's burning in my mind is who won the DFL primary for Senate, Flanagan or Craig. And Tane, this is the most expensive primary in Minnesota history, and it's relatedly one of the most combative that I've ever seen as far as the tenor of the ads, the tenor of the conversations, etc. Do you think that whoever wins, Flanagan or Craig, do you think that they'll get that support from the person who lost? That you'll see Peggy Flanagan wrapping arms around Angie Craig or vice versa to have a unified front for the Democratic Party?
I think that at the top, the actual candidates themselves, I believe that both of these individuals are professionals, and I mean that, like, in this context, they are professionals who will do that because they believe that they have a lot more in common than they have disagreements about, and they believe very strongly that they need to elect a DFL senator this year over Republicans. So I think that the two of them will. How will that trickle down to their followers, the people who have supported them throughout the primary? I think that is where the actual work ends up being. Like, it's not that hard to show up at a breakfast, later this week with the person who defeated you in the primary. I mean, it's kind of hard to be to be human about it, but like you figure it out, you do it. But are you then able to deliver the message to all the people who voted for you, who believed passionately in you that you were the best candidate possible? And now you are saying, I get that you felt that way about me. I want you to carry that same passion, or at least enough passion, towards the person who defeated me into November. That's where it's tricky and hard. And that's the part that I'm interested to see.
The other wrinkle I'm interested to see is if they end up both serving in the Senate, because it's not a whole bunch of chess moves to have Amy Klobuchar become our next governor, and then she will appoint her own replacement in the Senate. And to me, it just seems plain as day that she has to appoint a Democrat. We had Mary LaHammer on from TPT, and she was sort of intimating, like, even some people are campaigning who aren't Democrats. Yeah. Klobuchar's.
I mean, sure, of course,
she's a
there
ride
are
or
people
die for her party,
trying for that. I mean, I will nominate you, Sean. Like, we can nominate all kinds of people and suggest to Amy Klobuchar that she should consider. But yes, I think the chances of Amy Klobuchar actually appointing someone as one of her first acts of governor that is not a Democrat would be wild. So I do not put money, not that we're allowed to in Minnesota, on that in any way.
Do you think it's likely it will be whoever lost in the primary yesterday?
I don't know. Frankly, I think that there's a big piece where if Amy Klobuchar is elected governor, there's probably a thing going through her head where she's like, hey, I was just elected governor. I get to make the decision I want to make. I'm not going to sort of be boxed into offering a consolation prize to somebody else unless she really thinks that person is the best possible candidate. So I think that it'll depend a lot probably on how this fall plays out. And also, frankly, kind of maybe what her actual relationships are like with the different contenders for this. I mean, I will just say, again, having been around politics and political actors for a long time, there are things that are just sort of you're thinking strategy and you're thinking about how this will play out on some broad basis. A lot of politics is relationships, and Amy Klobuchar has been on the scene for 20 plus years and knows a lot of people and has a lot of strong connections with people. And she might have a short list of people that she is thinking about that we just have no idea who they are.
Election day in November is actually not that far away, and I'm very grateful we'll have Tane Danger on a little more than usual to chat about a lot of what is happening in the political realm in Minnesota. And frankly, Tane, I think you're one of the best sort of read and updatable about these topics. So yeah, more to come in the world of politics, but glad to be getting sort of a lay of the land on this the day after the Minnesota primary.
I'm looking forward to it. There'll be lots to talk about between now and November.
And before we move on to the next topic, I do have a special request for you. You heard Tane talking about his state fair experiences, topless and otherwise, and we'd love to know your state fair hidden gems. Like, what are the things you love to get to at the fair? What are your little secrets to survive a long day at the fair? We're going to be on site at the fair, and we want to put together a list of all the best secrets to enjoy at the fair. We need your tips to do that. Hit us up, 612-217-0637. We have a big mailbag to share with you, but before we do that, we're going to take a quick break. We want to welcome Ryan Bandy onto the podcast. He's the Chief Business Officer at Indeed Brewing, and we're talking about THC drinks today because there's a lot in question at the federal level about THC drinks, and that'll have a big impact for a lot of local businesses. And Ryan, I'm asking you a question that I think I actually personally know. THC drinks, often people think of them as like a sideshow for breweries, but actually THC drinks are a huge part of the business. In fact, Bauhaus, which ended up closing and now reopening, Drew Hurst, their old president, said there's no way we could do this without the income from THC drinks. Can you talk about, for Indeed, what amount of your business is made up from THC beverages?
Yeah, I think it is a much bigger deal to all the local breweries than people think. To your point, there's a lot of breweries that, it's probably eclipsing 50, 60, 70% of their business. And that has to do with market forces. That has to do with people like drugs. And obviously, it's going to be a thing you want to drink. Indeed, it's probably 25, 30%, at this point. And we're a big company, so that's not a small number. And I think the other thing is it allows us to co-manufacture and co-pack other brands because not everyone has a canning line and has big tanks. And so that's the other thing that the THC business, a lot of breweries are able to maybe make some other people's brands and keep their business a little busier. So it's another piece of the business that a lot of the local breweries do that has also helped, the weird times right now for breweries.
Yeah, and just to build on that, what I did a conversation on beverage industry recently. Minnesota is actually one of the strongest states for THC because we kind of got into it early. Is that fair?
Yeah. It was kind of, I mean, if you look back, I think it was 22 or whatever it was, kind of a whoopsie-daisy in the House, in the state House and Senate that basically clarified this kind of like, it was legal federally, but could you put it into drinks and food? And they kind of clarified that for us in Minnesota earlier than some other states did, or even some other states still haven't done that. And so Minnesota kind of took off early with both the manufacturing of it at craft breweries. Obviously, we were one of the first to jump in, because we kind of have a weird brand that made a lot of sense that people might like with THC. But that allowed us to kind of give a head start as far as how do you make it. Just having a head start allows us to be better at it. And then the market, I think, matured really quickly here because people got to know it as like, yeah, every brewery has one. And that's just not the case in other states.
Right. Okay. So to strong thing here in Minnesota, things are humming along in the THC beverage industry. And then again, for folks who haven't been paying attention, which I think there's actually a lot of people who weren't aware. This was all going to change and may still all be about to change this fall. So what was pending is pending to happen this fall?
So basically, the legality of it federally is built in the Farm Bill, and it's a 2018 Farm Bill, and that allows it to be legal federally to do hemp-derived THC. McConnell snuck in a thing last fall, actually before appropriations to open the government back up, that said that goes away. So basically closing that idea of hemp-derived THC being federally legal. And so that takes effect in November 12th or 14th or something this year. And so basically like early November this year, it will be illegal federally to manufacture and sell and have this stuff. Now, that is still on the books as happening. There's lots of things happening now, both, kind of like to do extensions, but then also kind of side bills to try to regulate it. Because that's kind of the idea. The people that were against this kind of say that like it's the problem because it's not regulated enough, which is true in a lot of states. Like Minnesota has done a good job regulating it, but you go to Wisconsin, it's like 100 milligram cans of this stuff next to your Bud Light or next to your Mountain Dew. And so we need regulation. I think everyone in the industry knows that. Do we need to totally stop the industry and halt it before the regulation? I think is one thing that like maybe politicians could figure out how to fucking regulate something together with the industry, but hopefully that happens. But yeah, functionally right now, come November, we can't legally, federally make this and sell this.
And part of the reason we're talking today is because just before the Senate went out of session, they did negotiate a new spending bill. And there is a provision in that, which actually Senator Klobuchar was part of, negotiating in a very bipartisan way that would extend this, drop dead date.
It's that deadline. Yeah. So there's this deadline in November. And before they left on recess last week in the continuing resolution, they added an extension to that deadline that moves it to December 11th or December 12th. And so it's only 30 days. So it kind of seems like a joke from the outside, and maybe a little bit is. I think the big thing about it that's really important is that it gets us past the midterm elections. It gets us into the lame duck session. And it also has the same timing as another appropriations bill that will have to be passed by December 12th to keep the government going. And so it kind of allows us to be in that same conversation of, hey, maybe we should extend this 3 or 6 months at that point because the government needs to keep going, and we think there's a really good way to regulate this. We just haven't had the chance to pass the bill. So that's why that extension, 30 days, doesn't seem like much. And it isn't from a business perspective. We can't change our business based on that. But as far as the hope, I think it tells us that it matters federally, which is not always the case with even things you think would. And that we're getting into a different window of time. The conversations will be different post midterm, where you're hoping more people will want to bring a win of a regulated space to their constituents. Maybe they're new or, that type of thing.
Ryan Bandy, I have to thank you sincerely for this, because that answer is the first time I've understood why people are like, our entire industry is going to be ruined on November 12th.
Yeah.
Oh, we have great news. Totally. Our entire industry will be ruined on December 11th. And people are like, yes.
Yes.
30 more days before we're ruined.
I think, and the bigger thing is that it matters because we've been yelling at our politicians for 12 months or whatever, 9.5 months. that we need to do something federally, and we haven't, there's been some bills kind of proposed with no strength. There's been no talk on it, like a bigger level. And so this, to me, it's more hopeful than it was 6 weeks ago, where like no one has talked about this. There's no bills really to pass, and we're 6 months away. It's like, well, there's no way that something's going to happen. And so I think this says that something's going to, it says at least there's a chance, because they're talking about it at the highest level of continuing resolutions, appropriations. And Klobuchar has it, I think it was her number one priority, right? She said, like, this is a massive priority to me, which makes sense. She's trying to be governor of a state with a lot of this, right?
Yeah.
So
and just to add to that, I mean, this extension passed like very overwhelmingly bipartisanly. Like they did win a lot of votes on both sides, which also kind of suggests that, it's not as though this passed like one vote and it just slipped through.
There was like Senator Budd from wherever he's from. Also, last name Budd being against this is just like too good for me. I felt like there's something out there for that. But yeah, he was trying to strip that, like he was basically trying to get rid of that extension, and that's what kind of brought it down to the line. It was literally like 2 a.m. or something on Saturday morning, late into Friday night. But it's an overwhelmingly bipartisan issue because, I mean, it's a $30 billion industry nationwide. It's a lot of like wholesalers and breweries and small retailers out in all parts of the country. It's not just like, it's not just kind of like this super partisan, the Democrats like weed thing. It's an extremely bipartisan issue in every state you go to. And the target market, like, I thought I would know the people that might have smoked a joint on our patio before. I know what they look like. Like, I thought those, and then I saw the people coming in to buy this stuff, and I was like, oh, this is different.
Yeah.
This is so different. Yeah.
Ryan, let's talk about those billions, because one might think that given where things could be headed at the federal level, that some of the big hedge fund money would be drying up. But actually, our producer, Adam, went to a tasting event at Indeed, and you were kind of saying that like the national big money, the type of stuff that, is really powering it to billions, is sort of funding it like there's not a federal ban coming. Is that still the case? And is that just idiotic, or is that them knowing more than we do?
Yeah, it's a great question. I hope that it's them knowing more than we do. But sometimes you look at some of these companies and then you're like, it's just idiotic, and that was a really dumb thing to do. So I don't know. I think it is interesting to see retailers specifically still launching, like Albertsons, or, like a month ago, Target expanded their THC into more states, into more stores. And that was like 6 weeks ago. So I'm like,
Gotcha.
There's just no way that they would be drawing that inventory over many states, buying it. I don't know. I haven't got a clear answer on that. Like the CEO of Target hasn't called me back. I think that, I hope that it's them knowing more than we do, and I'm hoping that there's some understanding that if we can broaden even wider, quicker, that it's going to be a harder thing, or it will matter federally more to more people. I think that in my mind would make sense as a strategy. But yeah, the risk that some of these retailers are taking now rather than 2 years ago or a year ago is really interesting to me. Yeah, and that's kind of still the same.
Ryan, you're the chief financial officer at Indeed, right?
I mean, more or less. I'm one of them, one of the couple people. Yeah.
A lot of people have said, including Drew Hurst, the former president of Bauhaus, said like, hey, if this ban goes through, we're closing up shop.
Yep.
But there's tons of spots selling flower weed, and that's illegal federally. Might you just go, I'm switching banks because you can't be banked in the same way? Like, if this goes through, can you tell me what Indeed might do? And particularly with your co-CFO helmet on, like literally, are you leaving one bank and moving to a cash accounting system? Right. What are you going to do?
A lot of really good questions here, Sean. If I knew all the answers, I think
if you knew the answers, you'd be the one CFO.
That's exactly right. I think, so the biggest thing for breweries specifically, I speak to our business, is that we have a federal license to manufacture alcohol. That's through a federal, and we can't not manufacture alcohol. Beer is still the bulk of our business. And so that is where it starts to get sticky, and it's basically a risk tolerance thing. And that's why, you'll get probably, if you ask 20 breweries, you're going to get 20 different answers as far as what exactly are they doing or planning to do. Because the risk is obviously, I have a federal license to make beer and then make liquor and hold liquor and beer. And then I have a license through Minnesota that allows me to make this THC stuff, but that's federally illegal. there's an option, or there's a very likely scenario where the TTB says you don't have your federal license to make alcohol anymore, right? Like they can come and be like, you can't make federally illegal things at the same spot.
Next to
that.
And what's TTB stand for?
Trade Tax Bureau, Tax and Trade Bureau. It's where the alcohol they get the money. They want the money from alcohol, right? And so that's the thing for breweries that does kind of make it sticky. That if I was just a retail shop, yeah, I might go only cash, and I might, I don't necessarily have a license tied to a federal government in the same way that we do. But also risk tolerance, like for a craft brewery, like we're kind of used to pushing the boundaries on shit. So like, yeah, I mean, what are we going to do? We're still figuring it out. But there's no way that we're not going to figure something out, right? Like we have to sell this stuff. We're crafty enough to try to figure it out.
Wow, that was the pun of the day. I love that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, and that is, I looked it up. It's Alcohol and Tobacco Tax and Trade Bureau, and people call it TTB.
Yes.
So
that's it.
For folks who are listening and they are waking up to like, wait, what? Like the THC ban, like. We are in an election year. People are going to be hopefully talking to candidates for U.S. House, Senate, what would you, if somebody's like really motivated and cares about this, what would you encourage them to talk to their candidates for office about?
First things first is the continuing resolution. The House still has to pass that when they come back. So the Senate passed it with that extension in there, that 30-day extension. Tell your representative to pass that CR and do not let that extension get taken out. I'm sure there's going to be the version of Senator Budd in the House side that's like, I want this gone because I'm scared of being high or something. I had a bad experience in college. But tell your representative to pass the CR. And then from there, I think it's tell your representatives to like keep the focus at the federal level because there's 1,000 things that are happening there. Ask them to try to keep the focus as they go through this and go into the lame duck as one of the few issues that really matter to them. Because especially in Minnesota, if you're listening to this in Minnesota, like, I forget all the numbers, and I can send them to you guys, but like, it's an enormous amount of jobs. It's an enormous amount of economic activity. And everyone talks that way and kind of feel like a republic. Also, people fucking love it. Like, yes, it's good for money. Yes, it's jobs and all those things matter. And obviously I run a company, so it matters to me. But also it's something that like people really love and it makes a ton of sense. Like, come on. Like, we have to find a way to keep this going. Yes, for the economic activity and meaning, but also just because it makes sense and it's like a good thing to drink. And it's like a thing that makes people come together and another reason, I don't know. It's just all of the positive things that we tell your representatives to give a shit about it, like at the federal level, and keep the pressure on.
Ryan Bandy is from Indeed Brewing. I also tip my hat to the entire THC industry in Minnesota, which has been recognized at the national level as really being a leader, not only in innovation, but in safety as well, which I think is first and foremost in everybody's mind as well. Thank you for covering these issues with us today. And hopefully things go in your direction at the federal level as well. But regardless, I'm glad you were able to talk about them today.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me on.
We'd love to hear from you, especially if you land somewhere differently on the discussion about legalized THC. There's a lot of states where it's a Wild West and a lot of people have had bad experiences. And if you have any of those to share with us, whether it's positive or bad, I'd like to know about it. So send us a text or leave us a voicemail on the CityCast Twin Cities hotline. That number is 612-217-0637. We have more to discuss, but before we do that, we'll take a quick break. All right. You thought you were listening to a podcast, but you're listening to the dulcet tones of Sean McPherson on vocals. Now it's time for a good old-fashioned mailbag.
Mailbag.
Oh, Tane, you're coming in. You're joining my singing group, and I'm thankful for it. Now, we're recording this on Primary Day, and we did put a call out to get your favorite traditions around voting. And this one is like by far our favorite. The caller asked to be anonymous, so we're calling him Beef. Thank you, Beef. Beef writes that I've been a head election judge for over 30 years. And Beef's tradition is that whenever he identifies a first-time voter after they've cast their ballot, instead of that standard I voted sticker, Beef makes a new voter crown, just a ring of the I voted stickers all around. And that is so awesome, especially when a lot of those recipients of the crown are teenagers and newly naturalized citizens. That is such a great story. Thank you for that one, Beef.
Beef, that was amazing. Beef also added something a little heavier. He said this year's election judge training was their first time in 30 plus years they ever discussed a bomb threat. That is really sad beef. I hope that your election day and everybody's goes off without a hitch and with many crowns.
And we're going to move it into the world of cooking blogs, because why not? We got a nice note from a listener named Brandon, who enjoyed my coverage of Pinch of Yum, which is a spot I go to for a lot of my recipes for my family. And Brandon was enjoying the website, but it was also draining his computer of the will to live because the ads and the other things that just make a lot of cooking blogs take up a lot of energy. And Brandon, I shot you an email about this, but I got to tip my hat to our executive producer, Anna, who wants to make sure that everyone knows about this Paprika app, which allows you to find a recipe living wild on the internet. Hit the Paprika and jaboom, you actually get the vital information of the recipe saved into your app. It can never be messed with. You're not going to get a million pop-up ads while you're trying to cook. So again, we are not paid by Paprika, but boy, does Anna love Paprika. So Brandon, if you're trying to enjoy the world of cooking blogs without draining your computer of energy and with less pop-up ads, let us recommend Paprika. And dear Paprika owners, start buying ads with us, because look, we already love what you're doing, so give us the heads up.
No free pub. Yeah, that's great. So this next one comes from Nell, a big listener of the podcast, who said, I was listening to the video store piece and was wondering how libraries don't come up in conversations about renting DVDs. I dream of abandoning streaming, and I have a DVD player upstairs and downstairs in the house. The SPPL, St. Paul Public Library app, is incredible for getting any DVD I've ever wanted. And the Lucky Day shelf is great for anything brand new. I think the library has the video store vibe of being able to touch all the DVDs and get what you want, and it's free. The Rice Street Library is the best Lucky Day shelf for getting new releases. The new Midway Library has so many brand new DVDs. That was my dramatic reading of Nell's note, which I assume that's exactly how they wrote it. Thank you, however you wrote it, for this tip, Nell.
I know Nell personally, and you sounded nothing like Nell, Senator. We got another note from somebody where there was no name attached, but they had a strong reaction to the hot water related to sexual harassment that Mayor Herr has been in this month. And they wrote, quote, I am not usually a black and white person. However, with regard to workplace harassment, I have no problem saying, no, you do not get to keep your elected role and position of power. You abuse this and need to go. Also, no means no, and consent must be obtained to use someone's likeness.
Interesting. So last, a neighborhood shout out from Beth T. Quote, shout out to Inspire Change Clinic for showing up during Metro Surge with home visits, medications, and food. Nice.
That is awesome. Beth, thank you for shouting out the wonderful people at Inspire Change Clinic. And thank you to everybody who wrote in, and thanks to everybody for listening, for reading, and for making the conversation in both directions. It really warms our heart to be in community with you. That's all for today here on CityCast Twin Cities. I'm your host, Sean McPherson. Ryan Bandy, Tane Danger, thank you for being here today. On tomorrow's episode, we're planning on talking about reviews from the first couple days of the Fringe Festival and Minneapolis' first farm stop. Don't miss it. You can get more news delivered right to your inbox by subscribing to the CityCast Twin Cities newsletter. If you enjoyed today's show, why not share this podcast with someone who has rented a DVD from the library? We'll see you back here tomorrow for more news from around the city.